The New World, a place full of gorgeous landscapes and hidden beauties. Between the herbivores, the plants, the monsters, or even the locales within which all of this is stored, there are miles upon miles of beauty to be found. My name is Fluffy Smelthers, and
Oh, fuck! Not you again! Sometimes you just need to take a hard look at what you love if you want it to improve. Unless it's a person. If you do that, you'll probably wind up punched in the face. I'm gonna preface this with the little disclaimer that I put in all the similar things that I make, which is that World is my first Monster Hunter game. I am not knowledgeable about other Monster Hunter titles, and as such I may not touch on something that relates to the other games that you will probably think about. So, with that out of the way, today I'm going to be going over my top 5 worst things in Monster Hunter World. So to begin with, let's go with some dishonorable mentions. Firstly, flying frantically through the gate goes the loading screens. This one seems like just a small thing at first until you take a nice long look at just how many there are. Let's say you are using a fairly offensively optimized set against an Odogaron. Most weapons can do that in around 2 minutes. To get into the quest, you have to wait through a 42-second preparation screen. What is a preparation screen for? I have no idea, because right after that, you sit through a 27-second long loading screen to get you onto the map. Then you do the 2-minute quest, which is all well and good because that's part of the gameplay, but then you have to sit through a 38-second loading screen to get back out. 1 minute and 47 seconds of loading, 2 minutes of playing the game. That is incredibly dense. It makes no sense. The loading is immense, which makes me feel tense. The one thing I want to do when playing a game is to play the game, not to sit there feeling lame.
What the fuck, Cotton? Have you forgotten who does the bad rap? What the hell was that crap? So long, goodbye. I might just cry. Oh, and by the way, I hope that you die.
Who won? Who's next? You decide!
The next one is that there's no blood. This one is more of a personal gripe and a super small one at that, as it is more of a design decision than a mistake or a missed opportunity. But personally, I'd love to have a small amount of blood coming out of a monster when I hit it. Maybe I'm just a sadistic fuck, but I feel like it would just bring that little bit more satisfaction to every single hit and make you feel like you're actually damaging your opponent. No crossplay. I know that probably isn't even remotely Capcom's fault, but it is nonetheless one of the worst things about the game. Now, to dive right into the most important thing in our lives, that which helps us survive and to thrive, which is
Number 5!
the fact that there isn't a fucking wedge beetle here. Like, actually, this is one of the most inconvenient... Wait, that's it, isn't it? That is what the lack of this wedge beetle represents. Inconvenience. In a game that spends so much time trying to make a world that the player will want to stay in for a massive amount of time, the amount of little inconveniences is shocking. This one is number 5 because it is a little bit nitpicky. Of course, conversely, there are a huge amount of convenient things that you'll probably not even think about that are absolutely fantastic. Sure, that wedge beetle could be chalked up as something that isn't thought of, but then you think about something like Palico gear. You can't actually change your Palico gear from an item box. That can only be done either in your room, which is an entire loading screen away from anywhere in Astera, or in your tent while on a quest or expedition. Sure, this isn't that far out of the way, but little stuff like this adds up, you know? Also, fucking Basil Geese.
Hi guys!
I love Basil Geese as a monster. He is fantastic in so many ways, but once you get over the initial charm of him infiltrating every quest, he just becomes so inconvenient. It's not like Devil Joe where he's just on the map and you might run into him. He actively seeks you out when you are finding a monster. And then bam, here he comes, drops 10 bombs on you and kills you because you put on your Rocksteady mantle before you knew he was on the map.
Number 4.
Armor aesthetics customization. We have recently been slowly getting more layered armor set options, which does help with this a bit, but it makes me ask the question why it took this long and why is it so damn limited? especially with a set like Death Stench. They added layered Death Stench, but they added it as the Alpha Death Stench set, the less dyeable version. You can only dye some straps, and that's about it. Layered armor is literally there to customize your visuals regardless of the set you are wearing, and they're adding it in the least customizable fashion. Fashion works on a lot of levels right now, but why wasn't this in from the beginning? And then on top of that, why is the dye system so limited? Sure, we can pretty much get any color on the rainbow that we want, but I want to be able to change more than one color on an armor set. I want to make it truly my own. Imagine if you could make the Xeno set look like this. You could argue that this isn't in the game because the game wants you to distinguish the difference between the alpha and beta sets, but to that I have two things to say. First of all, you could always lock it behind HR 100, the proper end of the story and the last main quest, and then that way you have to experience the intended visuals of the sets up until that point. Second, the proper way to do the difference between alpha and beta sets is not what parts can be dyed. The proper way is something like the Nergigante set, or the Kulvtaroth set, or even something as far back as the Pookie Pookie set, where the alpha and beta are visually diverse in an awesome way. When you give us alpha and beta sets that are this different, then you can give us a dye system with true freedom to mess with each part of the armor, and that would add so much individuality to every single hunter that I see. The other main counterpoint to this is that the increased difficulty in making a set that is both beautiful in the stat department and the looks department adds a massive moment of just pure satisfaction when you get it right. And while I can see that, of course, I understand that moment, I just think that it's sad that this game has so many fantastic armor designs that we oh so rarely get to see, and those would never make it into any one of those sets.
Number 3.
The grind. Now, this one is both good and bad, as the grind itself is a lot of the meat of the game. It is a lot of fun, but there is one big glaring issue with it that I think I would struggle to find anyone who disagrees with. The grind is too damn long. In a perfect world, a complete save would have just enough of every decoration to maximize the skills, given the perfect amount of jewel slots, right? If this is your aim, you have a long journey ahead of you. One of the biggest attention getters in this context is, of course, the legendary myth that is the attack jewel. Everybody gets one free. Then there are random drops. As somebody who has 700 hours in this game, yeah, you heard that right, 700 hours. How many attack jewels do I have? 3, including the free one. That is one specific example, but think about it this way. There are 98 skills which can be acquired through decorations. To reach the maximum of each of those skills, you would need 301 separate jewels, if you got the exact amount of each one. You may be wondering if I actually did the math on that, and my answer to you is that the names of decorations start with the letter S more than any other letter, with an astonishing 17 different decorations. If we were to say that an average tempered investigation has 3 boxes, and say that every box rolls a face stone that contains a jewel you don't yet already have the maximum of, that would take you 101 quests to collect. Now, I don't have to tell you how absurdly lucky you would have to be for that to happen, even if we exclude outside factors like getting streamstones instead of decorations, and the rarity of the face stones playing an important part in what jewel you get from it, and that it wouldn't be a stretch to say that you will probably get 50 or more stealth jewels for every attack jewel you even come close to getting. In reality, someone like me, who has done 1,387 quests, has wound up with 3 attack jewels, and the rest of the collection that I have, which isn't complete. Most of this, however, does come with a massive grain of salt, as this is just to give you some sort of distant direction to face yourself while you're playing the game, rather than some sort of on-screen direction.
Number 2.
The stun mechanic. I'm going to dig a little into other games in this one, just from allegories of what I've heard from other players, but most of this will be based on my personal, unbelievable disdain for the stun mechanic. But Cotton, you could just use stun resistance! Sure, I could use stun resistance, but why should I have to use 3 level 1 jewel slots in every single one of my sets to avoid a mechanic that is just not fun? Supposedly, if you do something with your left stick, the game says hit it back and forth, though I've seen people say everything from spin it in a circle to give it a little flick.
Pop it. Twist it. Pull it.
But one thing everyone seems to agree on is that it has minimal effect in World. In previous games, the stick-based action made a significantly larger effect, and therefore gave you at least some feeling of control. Why isn't stun a fun mechanic? It takes control away from the player. I have heard about confusion being a thing, which simply turns your controls around, and while this does make the game harder for the player, and does punish them for triggering the mechanic, what it does not do is fully remove control from the hands of the player. One thing that I never want to see in a game is a moment during combat where I have no control. Ah, but Cotton, if you just dodged the attack, you wouldn't have been stunned! Yeah, sure, you're right, but you're basically saying that I should use skill to overcome something that's just not fun. A counterpoint to this one is that there is the potential moment of massive satisfaction when you get stunned and the monster somehow manages to not hit you in that time. But personally, I think that that one moment is nowhere close to outdoing the absolute frustration that happens the other 90% of the time when it does hit you. I honestly just believe that stun is not fun.
Number 1.
Number 1. Fucking Juratotus. Okay, it isn't Juratotus, but he is a part of it. Surprise, surprise, number 1 is actually variety. In terms of weapon designs, both visually and statistically, and the monsters themselves. But let's start at the root of the problem and go over the fact that there are 33 monsters currently in the game. Back up a step, and on launch, there were 30. One of which is a walking rock, which you don't actually ever kill, which is fine. 30 monsters isn't that small at all from an outside view, and more than that, it's the start of a new generation of Monster Hunter. A new engine, and you always have to start a little smaller, right? Alright, now out of the 30 released monsters, 3 of those are subspecies. Subspecies are cool, but in a game with this number of monsters, having 10% of our available monsters being subspecies seems to make things just a little tighter. It takes a lot of variety out, as while subspecies are of course different in some slight mechanical ways, they do essentially have the same moves and look almost identical, aside from a little coat of spray paint. Of course, there's the argument to be made that subspecies are relatively easy to be added, and therefore they probably weren't replacements for other monsters, but simply extras that were added in. And that's fair. However, I do think that there might be a slight thought on their part of using it to sort of artificially boost the roster of monsters in this game. Rodobon and Uragon are incredibly similar monsters, to the point where I would say the major difference between them is the locale in which they live in. If Rodobon lived in the Elder's Recess, then he'd probably be covered in ore too. You're not that special, Uragon. Gyarados and Levisioth. No, never mind. I legitimately don't even want to talk about them.
Fuck this shit, I'm out.
But I guess I should. Gyarados is boring as hell, both visually and in terms of moveset, and he basically just ruins the reveal of Levisioth. Speaking of which, Levisioth is just a lava Juratotus. His advantage is that he does actually look a little bit cooler, but that is about it. He essentially reuses every single boring attack that Juratotus has, except that he has, like, lava, so sometimes it will, like, leave fire, I guess. Neither one of these monsters benefits from the existence of the other one in the game. And honestly, it would be better if one of them were just not in it. If the one being removed was replaced, I would say Levisioth any day of the week. Get us a cooler lava monster, and that would be ideal as hell. Sure, there may have been 30 monsters in the base game, but that number feels smaller and smaller the more you look at the roster. Now, let's move on to the weapons. Starting with the visuals, this one doesn't require a whole lot of talking, as the point is super simple and basically proves itself. The majority of the weapon designs in Monster Hunter World are based off of the base Iron and Bone skins, but with a little fluff added on top to make them feel a little different. I don't want to call this a result of laziness, but oh boy is it tempting. As the weapon models they actually put time into, they look absolutely fantastic. Let's take the Devil Joe weapons as a prime example. Sure, they were DLC that were added later on, but I think it is the only one consistently across all of the weapons that has a unique skin, so it is a great way to show it. Why isn't this the standard? Why isn't every monster's weapon path this unique at the end? That would be awesome, but we just don't get that. I get that the game is going for a more realistic vibe than former titles, and slowly building up the base weapon is a cool feeling, until we get to the end of the tree. The final weapons of every tree should be unique skins, but why aren't they? What bothers me even more than the visuals is the statistics. How many water weapons are available for your weapon type? Unless you're part of a select few, your answer should be one. One water weapon, and it isn't very good, is it? Most of the weapon classes aren't very good with elements, but one thing that makes me question this is, what if the main reason for that is the actual quality of the elemental weapons? With the exception of Fire, Dragon, and Blast, every element and status in World is extremely underrepresented, generally having 2 options each, a large portion of those also being hidden elements, which leaves you with an incredibly small number of choices when actually trying to construct a half-decent set. But with all of this considered, there is definitely something to be said about a game if the worst part is that there isn't enough of it. For all I have said up to this point, I honestly believe that this game is the closest to a masterpiece that I have ever played, and a fantastic start to a new generation of fantastic games. And I, for one, will heavily be on this train picking up the next title. Think of this not as a list of complaints, but as a list of ways to improve the next title. You are so close to the perfect game, Capcom. Don't let this opportunity slip through your fingers. I've been Cotton Dinosaur. Like if you liked the video, subscribe for more, and most importantly, ladies and gentlemen, until next time, stay sweet.